Greetings and salutations. Okay. Greetings and salutations. I'm an alcoholic and my name is Bill. Welcome to a Design for Living Big Book Workshop study. Today we are beginning Chapter 7, Working with Others. In the very title, my sponsor says that implies more than one. This is not a one teach, each one teach one. This is if you get the gift, you're going to continually give it away. Practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. It works when all other activities fail. I want you to note in the original manuscript, it said that works when all other spiritual activities fail. So you would think that imploring help from the heavens, prayer, meditation, worship, praise, that would be more effective. But what it's saying is intensive work with other alcoholics works when everything else fails because it gives us the opportunity to get outside of ourselves and pass this on. Back to that old adage, I sought myself, I could not see. I sought my God, he eluded me. I sought the newcomer and found all three. This is our 12th suggestion. Carry this message to other alcoholics. You can help when no one else can. You can secure their confidence when others fail. Remember, they are very ill. Life will take on new meaning. To watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow up about you, to have a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss. We know you will not want to miss it. Frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot of our lives. That's been my experience. That all of a sudden I get a fellowship that I crave. Loneliness seems to vanish. I get to watch other people recover and have a host of friends. This is important that the person they're working with has something to offer them, because if not, probably neither of them are going to be here for very long. Talks about on page 164 in our book, obviously you cannot transmit something you haven't got. So we've got to see to it that our relationship with God is right. We've got to trust God, clean house, and help others. And what happens here is the lights come on for other people and the fellowship does grow up. I will caution you on this. Depending on how sick you are, determines how sick the people are that God puts in your path. And guess what? I must be a pretty sick guy. I tell my sister I seem to attract all the mentally ill ones. And maybe I'm more mentally ill than I know. But sometimes we can provide assistance where they can't. There's a lot of people, like one of our my grand sponsors says, not everyone coming to Alcoholics Anonymous needs rehabilitation. Some of them need habilitation. In other words, not everyone comes in here knowing how to function, knowing how to eat with two forks or what's proper etiquette. And some of us have drank and drugged those features away, that we had them at one time, but they're so far removed that we need to be reminded or retaught. Now, remember, when this book was written, they were sending it out, more importantly than being in an area, because the next paragraph is going to tell us, perhaps you are not acquainted with any drinkers who want to recover. You can easily find some by asking a few doctors, ministers, priests, or hospitals. What happens now is all you got to do is show up at an AA meeting and you see all the sheep are there without a shepherd. As Dick Poutney, one of our old-time members of my original home group, he got sober in the 50s. Not that that matters, just that he had a lot of experience. And it was before the inundation of treatment centers and whatnot. He said, God has given us Alcoholics Anonymous and God will never take it away. But if we're not careful, we will give up our birthright to the treatment professionals. And what's happened is, and for a while, because of the HIPAA laws and other restrictions placed on by the treatment centers and hospitals, we couldn't go make a 12-step call, which we could do in the early 80s, where I'm familiar with. You could go to Rosary Hall. You could go to town. You could go to St. Thomas Hospital in Akron. You could go to St. Vincent. You could go to the places where drunks work 24 hours a day and sit there and talk to a new man. With the advent of the laws changing, you can't do that anymore. And now what's happening is people are getting sober somehow. They've got these big metropolis treatment centers, or what they call treatment centers, which are just, they're buying out convents here all over Cleveland and filling them with drunks and addicts off the street. And by the time you get them in Alcoholics Anonymous, they're under some treatment modality. So you don't get them when they're brand new and now they've got some new ideas that may or may not work, but usually contradict what we do here in Alcoholics Anonymous. They will be only too gladly to assist you, the people that were seeking help. Don't start off as an evangelist or reformer. Unfortunately, a lot of prejudice exists. You will be handicapped if you arouse it. Ministers and doctors are competent, and you can learn much from them if you wish. But it happens that because of your own drinking experience, you can be uniquely useful to other alcoholics. So cooperate, never criticize. To be helpful is our only aim. In my experience and what I've observed is sometimes we can get so righteous and know that we've been given this gift that we think that we're smarter or better equipped than the doctors and people that have gone to excessive years of advanced education, higher learning, to learn about things that we can't even imagine. So we don't go in there and override their system or think we know better than the doctors. It's we don't affiliate, but we cooperate, and that's what it's telling us here. When you discover a prospect for Alcoholics Anonymous, find out all you can about him. If he does not want to stop drinking, don't waste your time trying to persuade him. You may spoil a later opportunity. This advice is given for his family also. They should be patient, realizing they are dealing with a sick person. So, how do we discover a prospect? What they're talking about is someone gets a hold of Alcoholics Anonymous and says, "Hey, we got someone that we want you to talk to," because how would I be talking to someone who's not interested in stopping drinking if he had contacted me in the first place? They're telling the family, don't push too hard, because in other words, we want to talk to the drunk and see what the drunk's trying to do. Not all alcoholics want to get sober. It tells us that in the previous chapter. Most of us don't even want to admit that we're alcoholic. But if there's any indication that he wants to stop, have a good talk with the person most interested in him, usually his wife. Now, with the advent of all the women in AA, the same would apply to the husband. And significant others probably will come out in the 5th edition. Get an idea of his behavior, his problems, his background, the seriousness of his condition, and his religious leanings. You need this information to put yourself in his place, to see how you would like him to approach you if the tables were turned. So it warns us against arousing prejudice or coming along with our own religious leanings, and it's going to tell us no matter how great our convictions, we leave that to the side. We're trying to find out about the other guy rather than let him know about ourselves. Sometimes it is wise to wait till he goes on a binge. The family may object to this, but unless he is in a dangerous physical condition, it is better to risk it. Don't deal with him when he is very drunk unless he is ugly and the family needs your help. Wait for the end of the spree, or at least a lucid interval. Then let his family or a friend ask him if he wants to quit for good and if he would go to any extreme to do so. If he says yes, then his attention should be drawn to you as a person who has recovered. That famous past tense word. You should be described to him as one of a fellowship who, as part of your own recovery, try to help others and who will be glad to talk to him if he cares to see you. A lot of this is done by trial and error. These type of 12-step calls are not common. I've gone on 2 in the last, I want to say 18 months, but more specifically 2 years, to where I was dealing with a live drunk that was drinking, and I went to the house or to the wherever place that the alcoholic was. Sometimes they don't remember you being there, and that's depending on how drunk they are. Like I said, this is more experiential. They're telling us stuff on a book when it used to be that Alcoholics Anonymous wasn't on every corner. It certainly wasn't on Zoom. and it was barely in the phone. So people were writing in to Alcoholics Anonymous, wherever way they could get a hold of them, and they were sending a copy of this book, and they sent out 5,000 of them or something like that to begin with, maybe a couple thousand. And now people are going out making 12-step calls, and they may have never come in contact with the fellowship that we know in Alcoholics Anonymous. If he does not want to see you, never force yourself upon him. Neither should the family hysterically plead with him to do anything, nor should they tell him much about you. They should wait for the end of his next drinking bout. You might place this book where he can see it in the interval. Here, no specific rule can be given. The family must decide these things, but urge them not to be over anxious, for that might spoil matters. So this is the only illness where the people want us to get better more than we do. You know, if you have cancer, you're going to go to the doctor and do what he says. Usually, no one has to encourage you to go treat that malady. But when it comes to alcoholism, sometimes the alcoholic's not so anxious to get well as much as the family would be for him. Usually, the family should not try to tell your story. When possible, avoid meeting a man through his family. Approach through a doctor or an institution is a better bet. If your man needs hospitalization, he should have it, but not forcibly unless he is violent. Let the doctor, if he will, tell him he has something in the way of a solution. So they're given a lot of directions here more than their experience, aren't they, Rob? For the people on the recording, Rob gave the thumbs up. That means he agrees. When your man is better, the doctor might suggest a visit from you. Though you have talked with the family, leave them out of the first discussion. Under these conditions, your prospect will see he is under no pressure. He will feel he can deal with you without being nagged by his family. Call on him while he is still jittery. He may be more receptive when depressed. So he's coming off of a drunk. He's not feeling very good, and you're coming to see him. You don't want to bring up the personal stuff that the family's told you, because alcoholics like to get on the defense. Like my sponsor says, when you talk to me about my drinking, I tend to defend my drinking rather than say, oh, yes, you're right, go along with it. See your man alone if possible. Then it used to be you went on a 12-step call with two people, but I guess they're assuming that he's in a hospital or a detox. At first, engage in general conversation. After a while, turn the talk to some phase of drinking. Tell him enough about your drinking habits, symptoms, and experiences to encourage him to speak of himself. If he wishes to talk, let him do so. You will thus get a better idea of how you ought to proceed. If he is not communicative, give him a sketch of your drinking career up to the time you quit, but say nothing for the moment of how that was accomplished. If he is in a serious mood, dwell on the troubles liquor has caused you, being careful not to moralize or lecture. If his mood is light, tell him humorous stories of your escapades. Get him to tell some of his. When he sees you know all about the drinking game, meant to describe yourself as an alcoholic. Tell him how baffled you were, how you finally learned that you were sick. Give him an account of the struggles you made to stop. Show him the mental twist which leads to the first drink of a spree. We suggest you do this as we have done in the chapter on alcoholism, which is chapter 3, more about alcoholism. If he is alcoholic, he will understand you at once. He will match your mental inconsistencies with some of his own. Isn't that interesting that they say if he is alcoholic? They didn't say if he is an alcoholic. They're describing the condition known as alcoholism. If you were talking to someone with diabetes, they wouldn't say, I'm a diabetic. They could, but usually they'd say, I'm diabetic, which means they have this thing called diabetes. So if you are satisfied that he is a real alcoholic, begin to dwell on the hopeless feature of the malady. Show him from your own experience how the queer mental conditioning surrounding that first drink presents normal functioning of the willpower. Don't at this stage refer to this book unless he has seen it and wishes to discuss it. And be careful not to brand him as an alcoholic. Let him draw his own conclusion. If he sticks to the idea that he can still control his drinking, tell him that possibly he can, if he is not too alcoholic. But insist that if he is severely afflicted, there may be little chance he can recover by himself. So when they say too alcoholic, remember it tells us whether or not a man can quit drinking on a non-spiritual basis depends on the extent to which he has lost the power to choose whether he will drink or not. Not every alcoholic has lost the power of choice. They go in great detail in the previous chapters to talk about the hard drinker, the moderate drinker, and the real alcoholic. Some alcohol, by the physical definition of alcoholism, we have the allergy to the liquid drug alcohol. We all understand that. We put a drink inside of us, and rather than quenching or satisfying our thirst, it creates a greater thirst. And each drink leads to a more urgency to have the next drink than the previous. You can have that and be alcoholic without having the mental obsession or the inability, once you get stopped, to stay stopped. Not everyone can do that. Most of us, once we get stopped, can't wait to get started again because abstinence seems more painful than the consequences of drunkenness. That's the baffling feature of alcoholism, the book tells us, the utter inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity or the wish. But maybe this guy's not too alcoholic. Maybe he can control his drinking. I doubt if anyone who we're calling on is in a position where he can't do it. If someone's come into play to let us know that they think they have someone with alcoholism, especially back when this book was issued, they were probably far beyond where they thought they were. But insist that if he is seriously afflicted, there may be little chance he can recover by himself. So much for the people that say the steps are the answer, not the meetings, because we need each other. You usually don't hear that information except at meetings, Rob. No one sent me a letter in the mail saying, guess what? All you need is this book, Bill Swan. You don't need these people in these meetings. They tell me to go to a lot of meetings initially and let the alcohol get out of my system. Continue to speak of alcoholism as an illness, a fatal malady. Talk about the conditions of body and mind which accompany it. Keep his attention focused mainly on your personal experience. Explain that many are doomed who never realize their predicament. Doctors are rightly loath. Now that is a twofold word, loath. One aspect means they're reluctant to tell someone they're an alcoholic unless it would serve any good purpose. The other was being loathed meant being hated, because once a doctor diagnosed you with alcoholism, what he did was gave you a fatal diagnosis. Doctors are rightly loath to tell alcoholic patients the whole story unless it will serve some good purpose. But you may talk to him about the hopelessness of alcoholism because you offer a solution. You will soon have your friend admitting he has many, if not all, of the traits of the alcoholic. If his own doctor is willing to tell him he is alcoholic, so much the better. Even though your protege may not have entirely admitted his condition, he has become very curious to know how you got well. Let him ask that question if he will. Tell him exactly what happened to you. Stress the spiritual feature freely. If the man be agnostic or atheist, make it emphatic that he does not have to agree with your conception of God. He can choose any conception he likes, provided it makes sense to him. The main thing is that he be willing to believe in a power greater than himself, and that he live by spiritual principles. That seems to be a pretty tall order, meeting a guy. He hasn't fully conceded to the fact that he's alcoholic, and now you're telling him he needs to come to believe that there's a power greater than him and live by spiritual principles. When dealing with such a person, you had better use everyday language to describe spiritual principles. And there are many throughout this book. We don't want him to think just because we've had a radical change that we're filled with the Holy Ghost and he must be too. There's no use arousing any prejudice he may have against certain theological terms and conceptions about which he may already be confused. Don't raise such issues no matter what your own convictions are. I mean, I'm working with a couple guys right now that are so convinced there's only one way to the Father, but they keep getting drunk. And the problem is, once I define or comprehend that power, which is God, I believe it no longer is God because it's something I can describe or define. And what that means is it's very limited because my finite mind can't get beyond shit how the traffic lights operate every 500 feet apart so to keep the flow of traffic going. How can I describe the creator of the universe? But many of us do. And a lot of that has to do with agnosticism. That's why chapter 4 is so critical. Because not only does it describe someone who doesn't believe in God, believes there is no God, doesn't know, it deals with the one who's so sure that he knows, but he can't stop drinking, that maybe what he knows he doesn't know at all. So we've got to, oh, thank God Chrissy's here. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Get in here, girl. I sound like a monologue today. You clear that off the tape, Rob. Oh boy, and this is a perfect time for Chrissy to come in. Chrissy, you're gonna start 93.
Wow, I just jumped into something here. Okay,
Yeah,
93.
absolutely. 93. Your prospect.
Oh, great. My prospect, aka my future sponsee.
Oh, my sister gave you an applaud, Chrissy. Yay, Chrissy, in the chat.
I did. Okay, your prospect may belong to a religious denomination. His religious education and training may be far superior to yours. In that case, he's going to wonder how you could add anything to what he already knows. But he will be curious to learn why his own convictions have not worked. They're talking about worked to keep him sober, right? So he's got faith, but can't stay sober. I think that's what he's driving at here. And why yours seem to work so well. He may be an example of the truth that faith alone is insufficient. And we've read elsewhere in this book that faith without works is dead. We have action, so we have to have faith and perform works well. So it says to be vital, and vital is necessary for life, right? We have our vitals checked at the hospital to make sure that we have what we need to live. So that's vital. To be vital, faith must be accompanied by self-sacrifice and unselfish constructive action. We also learned that this is an altruist. This program functions on the spiritual as well as the altruistic plane. And the altruistic plane means that I'm concerned for and devoted to the welfare of others. And it says in the book that the root of my troubles is selfishness and self-centeredness. So they're suggesting that I need to be unselfish and I have to self-sacrifice. That's part of my program that will help me with the problem I suffer with, which is selfishness and self-centeredness and constructive action. So we've learned a lot about that already with the step work. Let him see that you are not there to instruct him in religion. Admit that he probably knows more about it than you do, but call to his attention the fact that however deep his faith and knowledge, he could not have applied it, kind of like we practice these principles in all our affairs, the application of demonstrating these principles in our daily life. I think that might be part of applying it. He could not have applied it or he would not drink. Perhaps your story will help him see where he has failed to practice the very precepts he knows so well. We represent no particular faith or denomination. We're at the top of page 94. We are dealing only with general principles common to most denominations. If you'll remember, there's a line, I think it's page 84. It says, love and tolerance is our code. Is that where it is? Yeah, love and tolerance of others is our code. Those are precepts. That's a principle. Love is, and tolerance. We have other principles that we have learned to be kind, patient, understanding, things like that.
And on the bottom of page 19, it talks about, of necessity, there will have to be discussions of matters medical, psychiatric, social, and religious. We are aware that these matters are from their very nature controversial. Nothing would please us so much as to write a book which would contain no basis for contention or argument. We shall do our utmost to achieve this ideal. Most of us sense that real tolerance of other people's shortcomings and viewpoints and a respect for their opinions are attitudes which make us much more useful to others. So it doesn't matter what my convictions are, let him have his own. And even though he has the faith that can move mountains, he still reeks of booze. So you bring that to his attention, because the problem is most of us, when we're that self-centered, as Chrissy was talking about, we have our God who does stuff for us, and it's so self-serving and self-centered that we're so blocked. And what this is telling us, we have to get out of our way. Faith without works is dead. And when I'm consumed with myself, I don't think about anyone but me. Thank you, Chrissy.
Yes, and I also, that what you just said lends to a belief that God would not provide what I needed. But page 63 says that he provides what we need if we keep close to him and perform his work well. So there's an understanding that if I take care of and contribute to life, life will take care of and contribute to me. Life, aka God. You can call God and see God as many words. This big book has made it clear. Okay, so we're on the top of page 94 now. This is my responsibility as the person talking to a future prospect, by the way. Outline the program of action, explaining how you made a self-appraisal. That would be my fourth step. Made a fearless and searching moral inventory of myself. How you straightened out your past and why you are now endeavoring to be helpful to him. And how do we straighten our past? We went through all of the steps. We admitted to God, to ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. We saw what was objectionable. We humbly asked God to remove our shortcomings. We prayed for strength to go out from here to do his bidding. That's all part of the steps that we've already learned. So it says it is important for him to realize that your attempt to pass this on to him plays a vital part in your own recovery. And if you don't understand that as a alcoholic who's now at step 12 here, that this is vital for your own recovery, that let's be clear, part of what keeps me capable of handling life, like page 14 in Bill's story says, I have to perfect and enlarge my spiritual life through sacrifice, self-sacrifice, and work for others. Otherwise, I won't survive the certain trials and those thoughts ahead. So I'm really strengthening my spirit, my spiritual life by doing this with another alcoholic, by carrying this message to another alcoholic, the 12 steps. That's what they're talking about here. So it says, actually, he may be helping you more than you are helping him. Make it plain he is under no obligation to you, that you hope only that he will try to help other alcoholics when he escapes his own difficulties. Isn't that great? That's like a promise. Like you can look forward to that. Like you will escape your difficulties. And step 3 prayer actually tells us how. It says in the prayer, take away my difficulties. We're praying to God that victory over them will bear witness to others of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. So it's when we are accessing thy power, thy love, and thy way of life that we actually escape our difficulties. We have victory. And so now we're here to direct others through the 12 steps so that they can have the same experience. So it says, suggest how important it is that he placed the welfare of other people ahead of his own. I mean, isn't that so counterintuitive to what you've experienced your whole life? No, I have to focus on getting my needs met. How will I get, I have to take care of myself. I have to make sure I get what I need and what I want. But this is saying, no, make it more important than your own needs to place the welfare of others. It just doesn't make sense to the brain. The brain that doesn't make sense. But that's where faith, if I do this, God will provide for me and I will receive what I need. That's a giant leap of faith. You might have to try it first and get the results later. Okay, it says, make it clear that he is not under pressure, that he needn't see you again if he doesn't want to. You should not be offended if he wants to call it off. And that's our problem. When we start to be offended, you have to realize you've got something going on. If there's enough, if that's a resentment, if you're offended, you have a resentment. Now it's time to do a little 10-step inventory on yourself, just saying. So we don't get offended if they want to call it off. For he has helped, it says, for he has helped you more than you have helped him. If your talk has been sane, here's some instructions for us, right? This is directions for us to be sane, quiet, and full of human understanding. You have perhaps made a friend. And that's kind of what Bill referred to on page, whatever that was, 19. Real tolerance for other people makes us more useful. Maybe you have disturbed him about the question of alcoholism. And that might be a good thing, right? This is because then if he's disturbed, he might go find out what's bothering him. This is all to the good. The more hopeless he feels, the better. Remember, that's what makes us start to go get help. When we get really hopeless, it's pushing us towards seeking help. Hopefully we start to offer the help that will be helpful to them and they start to get what they actually need. But it says he will be more likely to follow your suggestions. I mean, how many of you are like, yeah, I don't want to do that. I'm kind of okay. I don't need to do all this extra stuff. No, but when we get hopeless enough, we become willing. You want to say anything, Bill? You want to add anything?
I was just thinking, even back then, Bill Wilson was handicapped by his own experience. He and Dr. Bob, although Dr. Bob's house was about to be taken over by the mortgage holder and Bill was living on someone else's dime, they were in residencies. It was still married. And he's telling them, talk to the wife, usually the most closest to him, and find out all you can about him. Remember, they were dealing with drunks at their worst aspects at the time because there was no Alcoholics Anonymous on the horizon. So they were going into the Bowery, they were going into the asylums, they were going into the jitter joints and dry out places. And Bill was even dealing with some alcoholics who were living on the street or were homeless at the time. But he's coming from his experience when he does this. And I can be handicapped by my experience too. Like my sponsor says, if it's not my experience, then it's if it's your experience, it's not mine. Mine's the only experience that I have. So he's given a lot of stuff here that may or may not be the case. Like I said, right now in droves, we're dealing with people who end up in these big shelters. And they call them treatment centers, and what they are is places where these people have drank and drugged themselves into destitution and have nowhere to go. And I mean, they're big centers here. You talk about 100 and some guys in certain locations. And then we go in there and call on them. Well, they've already got some of their needs taken care of. So just keep in mind that it's real easy, just like my religious convictions, just like how I got sober, where I got sober, when I got sober. All those things can handicap me, so I need to put them all to the side and remember, like it says, that we're dealing it with alcoholics in their worst aspect. That makes sense?
Yes. And what Bill's talking about is like the last page of the doctor's opinion. He said, perhaps we came to scoff. It's like scoffing at all of this, contempt prior to investigation. They talk about that at the back end of the book in the spiritual experience. Honesty, so willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are essential for us, but most of us come with a closed mind. So back to page 94, it says, your candidate may give reasons why he need not follow all of our program. He may rebel at the thought of a drastic house cleaning, which requires discussion with other people. And by the way, that's like saying how it works. It says, at some of these, we balked. we balked. We balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but the big book says, and how it works, we could not. It says the result was nil until we let go absolutely, and that means to this program. So back to 94. Do not contradict such views. That's our job as a person approaching the new prospect. We're not here to contradict them. Tell him you once felt as he does, but you doubt whether you would have made much progress had you not taken action. This is where you're uniquely armed with the facts about your disease and your own personal experience. So we just explain where our experience has been. On your first visit, tell him about the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. If he shows interest, lend him your copy of this book. Or these days, there's plenty of books that you could just give them their own copy.
Isn't that interesting, Chrissy? They're sending this book out at the time it was published. There's less than 100 sober alcoholics. They're getting letters, and they were deluged by the Saturday Evening Post and the Cleveland Plain Dealer. And they're telling me as a new person who received this book, took this action, and had an awakening, that I'm supposed to tell the new prospect about the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I may not even have met any of them yet. So, I mean, they're taking it. He was very visionary, to say the least. It was almost prophetic, because that's what happens. We say, hey, come go with us. We're going to go to this meeting tonight. There's going to be a whole bunch of people just like you.
Top of page 95. Unless your friend, this prospect, wants to talk further about himself, do not wear out your welcome. Here's some advice. Give him a chance to think it over. I see a lot of people going chasing after, like crusading, like come back, and it doesn't work out well. It says, if you do stay, let him steer the conversation in any direction he likes. Sometimes a new man is anxious to proceed at once, and you may be tempted to let him do so. This is sometimes a mistake. If he has trouble later, he is likely to say, you rushed him. It's kind of like saying, who's in charge here? Who's the sane one? Listen to them and let them speak, but don't let them run you around like their boss. That's how I just heard that in my head. Okay, so it says if he has trouble later, he'll likely say you rushed him. You will be most successful with alcoholics if you do not exhibit any passion for crusade or reform. Never talk down to an alcoholic from any moral or spiritual hilltop. Here's our instructions. Simply lay out the kit of spiritual tools for his inspection. I was going to say that on page 25. If you go back to page 25. Says, when therefore we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us, that would mean the prospect, but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. So my job as the one who's already gone through the steps with this book is to now put the steps and the spiritual tools at the feet of somebody else. They either pick it up or they don't, but my job is just to lay it down for them to see. Okay. Page 95, show him how they worked with you, offer him friendship and fellowship, tell him that if he wants to get well, you will do anything to help. You notice sometimes people offer like shame on you, you're like, what's wrong with you? Like, we don't offer them judgment or criticism or anything like that. We offer them the spiritual toolkit, and we're just here to be friendly, offer a fellowship, and be helpful where we can. It says, if he is not interested in your solution, if he expects you to act only as a banker for his financial difficulties or a nurse for his sprees, you may have to drop him until he changes his mind. Sometimes people they call you up, but they don't really want help. Sometimes they just want you to keep them company because they're lonely, but they're not actually looking to change anything. So I have to say that, be mindful, because is what you're doing helping them? So I would stay connected to God. Please help me to be helpful. Is this helpful? It says this, so it says drop him until he changes his mind. You might have to until he changes his mind. This he may do. He might change his mind after he gets hurt some more. You know, the book says repeated humiliations and the final crushing of our self-sufficiency makes us willing. You know, sometimes people just have to experience a little bit more of that before they get willing. So it's okay. If he's sincerely interested and wants to see you again, ask him to read this book in the interval. After doing that, he must decide for himself whether he wants to go on. He should not be pushed or prodded. So I should not be pushing or prodding by you, his wife, or his friends. If he is to find God, the desire must come from within. If he thinks he can do the job in some other way, or if he prefers some other spiritual approach, encourage him to follow his own conscience. We have no monopoly on God. We merely have an approach that worked with us. And that's kind of like a beautiful promise, you know. We have an approach that worked with us. But point out that we alcoholics have much in common and that you would like, in any case, to be friendly. Let it go with that. Come in, Bill? Oh. Top of page 96. Here's some instructions for us. Do not be discouraged. If your
You know what, Chrissy?
Yeah, go ahead.
We're gonna go through this paragraph here, and then we'll stop because it'll be 10 till we'll let anyone with any questions or concerns come in. I know it'd feel like you got cheated, but you were on second shift today. We made compensation for that. But then we're going to talk about the second approach starting next week, which will start a whole new thought.
Okay, so we'll just wrap up with this last paragraph, top of page 96, telling us do not be discouraged if your prospect does not respond at once. Search out another alcoholic and try again. I don't know about you guys, but when I'm like all up in my own business, I'll be like, screw it. It didn't work. I'm done. I give up, you know, but we have perseverance and steadfastness, and we keep going because our program requires that we continue to do this. So it says, you are sure to find someone who's desperate enough to accept with eagerness what you offer. if you can't find a desperate alcoholic in the meetings that you go to these days, I don't know, you might want to remove the blinders off of your eyes, because there's so many sick and suffering alcoholics everywhere that there is no limit to the prospects that you could find. Step into any AA meeting, there's plenty. So if you're telling yourself, I can't find somebody to work with, I might question that. All right, I'm back to the book. We find it a waste of time to keep chasing a man who cannot or will not work with you. There are those who cannot or will not give themselves to this simple program, how it works, right? Cannot or will not. If you leave such a person alone, he may soon become convinced that he cannot recover by himself. To spend too much time on any one situation is to deny some other alcoholic an opportunity to live and be happy. I mean, talk about a promise there, an opportunity for us. We have that too, not just to live, but to be happy. I mean, that's extravagant promises. And so we don't want to deny somebody who's ready the help that we could be providing for them, guiding them through these steps so that they could get these promises too, to live and be happy, to have the power that they need to live and be happy. So one of our fellowships failed entirely with his first half a dozen prospects. He often says that he had continued to work on them, he often says that if he had continued to work on them, he might have deprived many others who have since recovered of their chance. I'm giving it to you.
Yeah, they're talking about Bill Wilson. He went out and did all those 12-step calls and no one was staying sober. And he went to Lois and said, no one's getting or staying sober. And she said, you are, Bill. But he was chasing him down for a while, and he was trying to convert everyone and tell them about his white experience. And what happened is Dr. Silkworth told him, Bill, talk drunk to a drunk. In other words, tell him about the allergy of the body and the obsession of the mind, and then you can introduce him to this power. But isn't it interesting on the last page? If he is to find God, the desire must come from within. That's what this whole thing is about. Accessing a power. It tells us to enable us to find a power greater than ourselves. It's the main purpose of this book. Other than at the beginning, it tells us to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered. So, Rob, I think we're going to stop the recording there for today. And we've got some time for the rest of the kids.